Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Disney Lorecana Set 2 Rise of the Floodborn set review. I know that's a mouthful, but it is what it is. I'm your host, Nick Heel, and let's see what Amethyst has to offer. First card, we get Arthur, Wizard's Apprentice. 3 mana, 1/3. Whenever this card quests, you may return another character of yours to your hand to gain 2 lore, and it only taps for 1 lore. So this card's interesting. There is a bounce sub-theme in purple in this set. So this, kind of enables it. It's just that it's uninkable. There are other uninkables I would rather play than this, and you don't really get that many slots of uninkables. It is good. I would caution playing more than 2, just because it is uninkable. But the list remains to be seen whether or not you can squeeze Arthur in, depending on the amount of uninkables that are playable. Blue Fairy, rewarding good deeds. 2/1/1 evasive. Whenever you play a Floodborn character, you may draw a card. Another Floodborn synergy piece. I don't really like any of these cards currently. It's just too hard to get a Floodborn character into play, and the rewards just don't really match up. Like, drawing a card is, of course, nice. It's just that it's really hard to chain Floodborns, and you really need to do that in order to make up for the fact that you're playing an understated card that dies to Tinkerbell 6. Chip Teacup, 1/2/2/1. It's just another one. We can skip that. Dr. Facilier, Savvy Opportunist, 4/4/2, Evasive, 1. This card's interesting. It's not very good, but if you are losing to evasive cards, you might want to consider this card. It never will survive a trade until unlike you're attacking something like Pascal. And by the time this card comes down, it doesn't attack till turn 5. So that Pascal's already generated a few lore. So that kind of interaction isn't really needed. 4, Elsa Gloves Off, 3/4/1, Challenger 3. I'm actually not sure if this Elsa is better than the 4/4 Vanilla Elsa from set 1. It looks better, but I don't know if it plays better, because having an additional 4 on defense, additional power on defense, is very powerful. But this thing will trade up. So if you're playing Shift Elsa and you're looking for a shift target for that Elsa 8, this is better in my mind than the other options. It's not that much better. Just sort of play which one you like. Fairy Godmother, here to help. 5/3/7/2. Just a vanilla, nothing special here. 7 toughness is a lot. 7 defense is a lot. And being able to tap for 2 lore is nice, but it doesn't have the power needed to threaten other cards. So I don't think this card's very playable. Fairy Godmother, Mystic Armor, 5/3/4/2, Shift 2. Whenever this character quests, your characters gain Challenger 3, and when this character is banished in challenge, return this card to your hand. So now this card is what Dr. Facilier 7 from set 1 wants to be, but this one does it a little better, though it does require you to quest, whereas Facilier is just always there. But the fact that you can shift on a Fairy Godmother's, and there is a Fairy Godmother in this set that I know about that is good shift target for it. The downside to this card is it is understated as a 5 cost, so if you're not shifting, you are losing value that way. But it is inkable, so being inkable versus uninkable just makes a matter difference. If this card was uninkable, I would just be like, this card is bad because it's uninkable, and you can't really afford to play situational cards in your uninkable slot. You really need them to do something special in order to justify drawing them and not being able to play them as an ink. But this card is interesting. I probably will be brewing around this card a lot because I think that the effect is quite powerful, but it remains to be seen if the meta will be that. And just like that, Fairy Godmother, 3/3/4. Fairy Godmother, Pure Heart, 1 lore. Whenever you play a character named Cinderella, you may exert chosen character. So now when this got spoiled, I was just like, I didn't understand that we were already at the stage where we can just make a better wardrobe, and this card is literally just a better wardrobe. And there's a Fairy Godmother to shift target. So 3 mana, 3/4 is exactly what you're looking at of a 3/4. It threatens the lower costs. It threatens the cards vertically besides other 3 mana 3/4s. And it also does tap for friends from the other side. So even when you tap for friends, it will probably get some incremental advantage, whether it be killing a character outright or putting 3 damage on something that you can clean up afterwards. So all in all, good card. Hey, Persistent Presence, 2/2/1/1. When this character is banished in a challenge, return this card to your hand. Yeah, the biggest issue with this card is that it doesn't really do anything. Your opponent can ignore it. And if your opponent is ignoring it, it doesn't... Like, they'll interact with it when they want to. And if they do interact with it, you still have to spend 2 ink on this to replay it. Now, you could, play it early. Hopefully it dies, comes back, play it as a land later. That's a little bit more value, but still not the kind of value I'm looking for my 2-drop. So I don't think this card is very playable. Jiminy Cricket, Pinocchio's Conscience, 2/1/2/1, evasive. When you play this character, if you have a character in Pinocchio in play, you may draw a card. The biggest issue with this card is that it's understated. Everything else about it is good, but just the stat line. Even if it was a 2/2, it would be it'd be a lot better. But as a 1/2, 1/2 evasive, if it had 2 lore too, I could consider playing it. But rightfully so, they're being tame with the evasive cards, which I think is correct. Cusco, Wand and Llama, 2/1/2/1. When this character is banished, you may draw a card. It's bad. Don't play it. 1 damage, draw a card for 2 ink is not a good exchange. Now, if it was a 1/1, if it was a 1 cost, 1/1 lore card with the same effect, it'd be interesting. I still don't think it would be playable, but I will say eventually they'll probably print cards to make this card playable, but we just don't have any of those cards around right now. So something to look forward to in the future, I guess. Madam Mim Fox. Oh yeah, we're going to talk about this card. 3/4/3/1. When you play this character, banish her or return another chosen character to your hand. Rush. This card is very good. It's so good, I would call it meta-defining. Basically, what it means that for any character with 4 toughness, you really have to justify what happens when your opponent mims you. And if it's an even exchange, that's fine. But if it's an uneven exchange, you have to really think long and hard whether or not that card should be in your deck, since this card exists and is very powerful. Madam Mim, Purple Dragon, 7/5/7/4. Evasive. When you play this character, banish her or return another 2 chosen characters of yours to your hand. I don't know how to evaluate this card. It looks good. I don't know how many, though. I'm going to start with 1, maybe 2, and then go from there. It's just 4 lore cards are really good. They just end the game so quickly. If you generated any incidental lore, you suddenly start ramping up very quickly. And a 5/7 for 7 is actually a pretty good rate. This card does make Greatest Criminal Mind better because it does die to it, which is why I don't want to play 4. I think 4 is a little clunky. I even think 2 is a little clunky, but I want to try this card out first just to see if it's actually playable or if it's bad. Right now, I'm undecided. I could go either way, but I'm edging more towards playable. Madam Mim, Rival of Merlin, 5/2/5/2. Shift 3. You can play this on top of a Madam Mim for 3. Tap, play a creature with cost 4 or less for free. They gain rush. At the end of turn, banish them. So this card sparked some discussions when it was spoiled among my playtest group. And the consensus we came to is that it's powerful, but we don't know if it's the right time for it. Because being able to play characters for 4 free, for less or free is very powerful. It lets you change your extraneous card resources into actual game objects that you can use to interact with your opponent. But the downside of this card is that it's just a one-shot, and notably, you still have to play all the costs as though you were playing it, because you're playing the card as opposed to putting it into play. And since it does get banished at end of turn, I don't really know if there's a way around that. they haven't released comprehensive rules yet, so I can't accurately describe what happens when you put a character in play and then shift onto them. Does it die? Does it not die? If anyone knows, like, and they can back it up with like a link to a ruling from somewhere, please put it in the comments. I would love that, just to know how powerful this card can be. Because in the vacuum, it is very powerful, but it will take some games of the format to understand if you can really afford to play a card like this. Because it is powerful, and I expect it to be played. But I think that I'm not the only one with questions on the ruling, because if you can shift onto the characters and make them not be banishable, that makes this card a lot better. Meta Mim Snake, 2/3/3. When you play this character, banish or return another chosen character of yours to your hand. I like this card a lot. 2 mana 3/3. It's great. The things you're returning are 1-drops, which can become lands if your hand is Landlight, or ink if your hand is Inklight, or they can be redeployed for the rest of your bounce stuff. Notably, the curve 1-drop, 2-drop Mim, 3-drop Mim doesn't exist, but I think Meta Mim Fox is more of a 4-drop play, for cost play, because you can play your 1/3 and you can play your Mim in the same turn, so you don't expose your 1/3 to removal options if your opponent wants to deny you the easy on-board Mim 3. But this card, it is good. I like it a lot. Though I think I'm like the only one, because it doesn't seem that impressive, but just having a 2 mana 3/3 all the time is just, it's everything Prince Eric wishes it was. No, not Prince Eric. The 2 Prince, Steel Prince that people play with Challenger. All right, first Merlin Crab, 3/3/3/1. Pretty solid on right there. Nothing special. When you play this character, when Elise play, chosen character gets Challenger 3 this turn. I actually like this card a lot. Purple now has access to Megara, so it means that the color combination you play with purple can change. Before, playing a deck like this would require you to play green, so you could have additional ways to pump up your less powerful cards in order to make them trade up. And this card will enable a lot of trading up, because Challenger 3 is just a lot. Even in, say, worst case, you don't have a card to actually trigger him. You can always just suicide him into a card just to get that Leaves Play trigger, which is always nice. Just very flexible card. All right, Merlin Goat, 4/4/3/1. When you play this character, when you Leaves Play, game 1 lore. This card's really good. It's the payoff for all your bouncing. It shouldn't be too hard to make one of these cards gain 4 lore. And since you're bouncing this card a lot, it's going to be in your hand, protected from removal, as opposed to being on play and maybe being interacted with. And it's in land. It's an ink. So card's good. Just make sure you, when you design your decks, make sure to have some cards in mind. Especially purple. Purple got really good. Merlin Rabbit, 2/3/1, 4, uninkable. When you play this character, when you Leaves Play, you may draw a card. Another payoff, not as good as the previous Merlin because it is uninkable. But this card's still good. Being able to draw 2 cards a turn is very strong. And you need to have a critical mass of payoffs in order for a deck in order for the gating mechanic. So gate is a magic term for basically just returning a character in play that you own to your hand. And gating needs payoffs in order for it to be truly powerful. And there are enough payoffs for it. It just remains to be seen how many of the payoffs you need consistently. Merlin Shapeshifter, 4/1/5/1. Whenever one of your other characters return to your hand from play, this character gets +1 this turn. So this card seems like a payoff for the bounce. It's not. On its face, it's a 1/5 for 4, so it doesn't really impact the board that much. And how many cards are you going to return each turn? I would think the maximum is like 2 to 3, maybe in the late stages of the game. So if you have 2, this is a 3 lore, but it's just a 1/5. So it's really just, usually a 1/5 will just get 1 tap, 1 lore off, and then die. And if you're saving, say for example, this card also requires it to be face up. So your opponent gets to choose whether they want to interact with it or not. They can be like, they can decide if they want to interact with your threat or if they want you to spin your wheels and commit so that they can interact with it later more profitably. And unfortunately, this card doesn't really allow you to play around that. Merlin Squirrel, 2/2/1/1. When you play this character, when you least play it, look at the top card of your deck, put it on either the top or the bottom of your deck. So this looks like another enabler. Unfortunately, since it's cheap, so you can develop this before a mint and get a little additional value, but it's just a 2/1. The card itself, being 2/1 means you're not trading up. It's very rare that a 2/1 trades up. And by trading up, I mean trading for something more that costs more ink than it. It's just with the amount of 2/3s for 3 that they're printing, a 2/1, you really need that third power. So I wouldn't play this card. But prove me wrong, right? Peter Pan Shadow, not Zone On, 4 uninkable, 2/3/2. Evasive Rush. Your other characters with Rush gain evasive. So this card is interesting in that it just has 2 keywords on it that I don't think any other card has. Does it make it good? No. It just makes it interesting and unique. If it was inkable, I'd be more interested in it. Uninkable, again, you can't really afford to play slots on these situationally powerful cards. Because if you don't get immediate value with the Rush, then why are you paying the 4-drop? And the amount of evasive creatures that are played, most of them have more than 3 toughness. So you're not even getting a good trade unless they already had damage on it through somehow. And a 4-mana 2/3/2, basically Pongo. This is like Pongo Plus, except Pongo is also a land. And I think that's the real consideration. If this card was a land, it would be a lot better, but it's not. So this card, Pinocchio Star Attraction, the PSA, 2 uninkable, 1/1/3. It's good. I don't see how. So if people are going to continue iterating on Ruby Amethyst into the next set, I don't see how that deck beats this card, at all, in a reasonable fashion. They have to play cards like Gaston or Maleficent 3 in order to threaten it, since they're not playing 1-drops. So if you're if you're going first and you spend your turn 2 playing Pinocchio, and then they spend their turn 2 playing Gaston, you can tap your Pinocchio for 3 lore, and then you can play a bodyguard, like the new Prince Eric 3. And then your opponent kind of just, they have to have Rafiki. But if they have Rafiki, I mean, you can also consider playing around it. It requires them to have specific cards in their deck that are fine. And if they don't have those cards, they're just going to get buried under the lore of this card advantage. But the fact is, it is undercosted as a 2/1/1, and it's also uninkable. So this kind of card really spawns its own archetype. Or more, I should say, it really invigorates a lesser tier archetype from set 1. The purple-green turbo lore deck, which just tries to jam 3 lore characters as much as it can. And this card's another 3 lore character for that deck, which all it wants to do is just drop it. It does die to tank, but so I'm not sure if you play 4 of this card. In turbo lore, you probably play 4. In reasonable decks, you probably play 1 or 2, because it is very powerful in a matchup, and it's also not the worst thing to draw because it is so cheap. Pinocchio on the run, 5 uninkable, 3/3/2, shift 3. When you play this character, you may return chosen character or item with cost 3 or less to their hand. It's bad. So you live the dream. You play your Pinocchio 2. Then you shift on your Pinocchio 3. You lose a lore in the process. And all you really get is like a better befuddle. So you're losing the lore. You're developing a 3-3 for 3, which is on rate. And the bounce is fine, but the fact that is that you're losing the lore also next turn because you can't tap your Pinocchio for 3 anymore. You can only tap it for 2, which makes me think that this card isn't that good. Pinocchio Talkative Puppets, 2/1/1/1. When you play this card, you may exert chosen opposing character. This card on certain board states will be very good, but it's uninkable. Good and limited though. Like, this card's good and limited. Just being able to kill whatever character you want, hopefully, is not good enough for constructed because it's uninkable. But if it was inkable, I would talk about it more. But for now, meh. Winnie the Pooh, 5/5/5/2. Best art in the set. Come at me. But if you have a foil copy, I would like one. So back to the card. It's very easy to evaluate. This is why I'm just like talking over it. This card is like the baseline of what I would call a playable card. It remains to be seen whether a 5/5/5, so a 5 ink 5/5, is playable and is it good. Because like this card's kind of like Cerebus, except it trades off a point of defense for an extra lore. And honestly, that might just be more than enough to put it over the hemp. Being able to tap for 2 lore instead of 1 lore is just such a big increase. Yzma, scary beyond all reason. 6 inkable 4/4/2. Shift 4. When you play this card, shuffle another chosen character card into their player deck. Their player's deck. That can't be right English, but that player draws 2 cards. This card's really good. It's like really good. The next Yzma is the reason why it's really good. Being able to deal with an opposing character on curve, so say you're shifting 4, is very powerful. Even though they draw 2 cards, the tempo advantage from getting rid of that character and also developing your 4/4 is very good. And that is basically just the floor of this card. The ceiling of this card is to target your own card that's already done a value trade. So not only do you get rid of a damaged character to get some value, you also draw 2 cards, which I think is the true strength of this card. It's also, because you're drawing cards, it is also a bounce payoff. Because every time you replay Yzma, you can just target another useless card that you have to just draw more cards to hopefully go through your deck to find something relevant. And again, the floor is just literally a Flame Tongue Kavu from Magic. I mean, it's more like, I don't know. Naturalize is a card that's been playable in other card games. Like, well, I'm talking about Hearthstone right now. Naturalize, and this card just gives you a Naturalize. The card was so good it had to be nerfed or removed from the game. I can't remember. It was like removed from Standard or something because it was just too ubiquitous. Yzma without Beauty Sleep, 3/3/4/1. Exactly what you want to see out of your 3-drop. You know, the fact that it's a Yzma means you get to shift Yzma. This card is good because you don't have to. Usually when you play a shift target, you have to give up some tempo in order to develop the shift target to get the value underneath the line. This, you don't give up any tempo. A 3/3/4 is actually the rate you want for a 3-drop. So, you know, I expect to see a lot of Yzmas. Now we get to the song, Gruesome and Grim, 3 uninkable. Play a character with cost 4 less or free. They gain rush end of turn. So this is just the Mana Mim, but instead of using a character ability, this just uses a card. Right now, it's not very good, but cards like this, all that takes is one very powerful graveyard or whenever they get banished effect. You know, one very powerful graveyard effect, and there aren't that many in the game right now, if any. So that card is just another card that you put a pin in it, and then eventually, when a new set gets spoiled, you look to see what this card can do with the cards, and if something very powerful comes up, then you go on that. You go down that line, but right now it's just not. It's nothing. 1, I'm stuck. Chosen exerted character can't ready at the start of turn. It's bad. It doesn't do anything. You're investing a card. You can get more out of a card than this effect. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if it ever wins a game, because that's the situation that you put the card for, but it just doesn't come up like ever. Legend of the Sword and the Stone 2. Actually, I haven't seen this card. Chosen character gets Challenger 3 to this turn. Oh, I was expecting something more. I really like the Sword and the Stone. It's fine. It's not very good. Just worse than Crab Merlin. Because you have to actually spend resources and you don't develop a creature or a character. Blinding Contract. 4 uninkable. Tap one of your creatures, exert chosen character. It's just, again, it's uninkable. And in order for this card to be very good in Constructed, you just need to have a bunch of efficient cards, and your opponent needs to be playing. There's just a lot that needs to be good. It's probably good in Limited, though, since being able to deal with a problem card on your terms is good. I don't know how many I would play in Limited. Probably just 1. I don't know if I play 2. Croquet Mallet. 1. Banish this item. Chosen character gains rush this turn. No, until there's actual payoffs for cheap items, you just really ignore them. They don't really do that much. But if there ever is a synergy deck that requires a bunch of cheap items, well, we'll see. Perplexing Signposts. 2 uninkable. And banish this item. Gate your card. Just worse than the other enablers. If it was repeatable, it would be interesting. But it's not. So, in a pinch, I guess. But it's uninkable, so I probably wouldn't play it. The Sorcerer's Spellbook. Tap. 1 ink. Gain 1 lore. 3 uninkable. This card's really good. Why it's good? Because it wins the game eventually. It forces the control deck to actually have to, race, which they're not that well designed at doing. Like they have the ability to. It's just you force them to have to deal with it. And if the control deck is still Ruby Amethyst, then this card's also good in that deck, because in the mirror it just means you win, because there's just no way to interact with items. So they can draw all the cards they want. You're just going to gain like 1 or 2 lore every turn, and then in 10 turns. If you have 2 out 10 turns, or if you had some chip getting in, like you don't really need this card to gain more than like 6 lore, realistically. So like even if, say you draw this in your last 7 cards and you're at 14, you just play it, they have to race. So then all of the tools, the removal spells that are usually bad in the mirror, become very powerful, because they're forced in a position to have to race you when you're just literally just tapping an ink to gain a lore every turn. If you are just missing this card, play with it a little bit, especially against the control deck, to see the full power of it. The only thing holding it back is that it is uninkable, but it is powerful enough in the constraints of last format to warrant a deck slot or 2. Well, that's all the Amethyst cards. So stay tuned for the next part, and thanks for watching.